It was a regular day for Class 2A, and most of the students were on their way to homeroom, chatting among themselves. As they entered the classroom, no one seemed to notice the green-haired boy already seated with his head down on the desk. However, Shinso Hitoshi, who sat right behind Izuku and was a close friend, did notice. He had a crush on the smaller boy, which made him particularly attentive. Shinso observed Izuku fiddling with a fidget toy under the table, his hands shaking and his leg bouncing nervously. He knew that Izuku had sensitive ears, something Mr. Aizawa had informed the class about, but social awareness among the students was lacking. Concerned, Shinso stood up and crouched down next to Izuku's chair. "Hey, Izuku, you okay?" he asked softly. Izuku jumped at the sudden voice and lifted his head, revealing deep, tired violet eyes that met dull green ones. "I'm fine, Toshi," Izuku mumbled, but Shinso wasn't convinced. He could see that Izuku was struggling, trying not to appear weak, especially as a hero in training. Izuku kept telling himself he needed to overcome the loudness of the world around him, but it wasn't easy. Years of bullying had left his ears sensitive to loud noises, and the explosions from Katsuki's quirk during their childhood had damaged his eardrums. Shinso quickly retrieved his headphones from his bag and carefully placed them on Izuku's head. Izuku flinched at first but relaxed as soft music began to play, soothing him amidst the chaos of voices in the classroom. He offered Shinso a small, shaky smile as Shinso gently took both of Izuku's hands, rubbing soothing circles on the back of them. About 5 minutes later, Izuku had finally calmed down. The tremors in his hands had subsided, and the bouncing of his leg had stopped. He turned to face Shinso properly, resting his forehead on his shoulder. Shinso continued to hold Izuku's hands, fighting off a blush that threatened to rise. Suddenly, the door opened to reveal their tired homeroom teacher, Eraserhead, also known as Shoyuta Aizawa. The students scrambled to their seats, but Shinso carefully removed his headphones from Izuku's head, put them back in his bag, and gently lifted Izuku's head off his shoulder. He ruffled Izuku's hair affectionately before returning to his seat. Aizawa observed the interaction and hid a smile beneath his capture scarf. He was aware of Izuku's sensitive ears and the bullying he had endured in middle school, as well as the support he and Present Mike had provided by adopting Izuku. "Alright, everyone, I have an announcement," Aizawa began. "Principal Nizu has informed me of a singing competition for the whole school. Participation is completely up to you. You can work in groups or solo, and you have the next few days to plan. The show is on Friday. Now, I'm going to sleep, so don't disturb me unless someone is in serious trouble." Once Aizawa finished, he climbed into his sleeping bag and laid down, facing the wall. The classroom erupted in cheers, which, while loud, was not enough to wake Aizawa. Izuku instinctively covered his ears to block out the noise. Shinso returned to Izuku's side, rubbing his back gently as Izuku's hands remained over his ears. Shinso glanced around the classroom, hearing the girls discussing forming a girl group and the boys doing the same. He noticed Izuku was deep in thought and decided to let him be, taking the opportunity to admire him. Shinso loved Izuku's slightly round face, sharp jawline, and pink lips, which he often kept moisturized. However, he noticed that Izuku's eyes, which used to shine brightly, now appeared dull. Shinso was aware of Izuku's past struggles but refrained from prying, knowing that Izuku would share when he was ready. Despite not knowing the full extent of Izuku's experiences, Shinso was determined to be there for him, offering protection and comfort in any way he could. No matter what happened, Shinso would always stand by Izuku's side. It was the day of the concert, and it was Class 2A's turn to perform. One by one, groups took the stage until it was finally Izuku's turn. He had chosen to sing a song he wrote about his feelings. Though he was unsure if people would like it, there was no turning back now. Standing backstage, he paced nervously, preparing to face the audience. Izuku had only 5 minutes left before he had to perform in front of the entire school, and the thought was terrifying. Shinso, who had come to check on Izuku and offer support, noticed him pacing and approached. "Hey, Aizu, you okay?" he asked. Izuku stopped and turned to Shinso, panic evident in his eyes. I don't know if I can do this, Toshi, he admitted. Perform. I know you're scared, but I believe in you. Your voice is amazing, and I'll be right there cheering you on, okay? Shinso reassured him. Izuku's worries flooded his mind. What if people thought his song was weird? What if he messed up? But Shinso interrupted his spiraling thoughts. You will do great. Don't panic, okay? You'll be fine. Shinso pulled Izuku into a hug, then cupped his face, smiling warmly. Izuku managed a small smile in return. I love the outfit, by the way. It suits you, Shinso said, connecting their foreheads and gazing into Izuku's eyes. You really think so? Izuku asked shyly. I do. You look gorgeous, Shinso replied confidently. Suddenly, Present Mic's voice boomed through the speakers, announcing, time for the last performance, Izuku from Class 2A, enjoy the show. Izuku jumped at the loud sound, gripping Shinso's shirt before hesitantly letting go and making his way to the stage with him. Remember, you will do great. I believe in you, okay? Shinso encouraged as they reached the side of the stage. Okay, thank you, Toshi, Izuku replied shyly. As he stepped onto the stage and grabbed the microphone, he could hear some of the pro heroes cheering him on, which gave him a boost of confidence. The background music began to play, and Izuku took a deep breath. He started singing, Another One Bites the Dust. Oh, why can I not conquer love? He glanced over to see Shinso smiling and giving him a thumbs up, encouraging him to keep going. As he sang about trust and resilience, he spotted his childhood friend turned bully in the crowd. You did not break me, I'm still fighting for peace, he sang, moving along the stage with passion. His classmates watched in awe. Wow, he can really sing, Mina remarked. Yeah, but the lyrics are deep. I didn't know he felt like that, Kirishima added. I can't believe he didn't tell me he could sing, Jiro said, looking a bit sad. While his classmates discussed Izuku's performance, Shinso watched with concern, captivated by Izuku's voice. As the song continued, Izuku expressed his determination and strength through the lyrics, revealing his struggles and resilience. The crowd erupted with cheers as he finished, and Izuku bowed before quickly running off stage, overwhelmed by the noise. He ran straight into Shinso's arms, embraced in a warm hug. You did amazing, and your voice is incredible, Shinso whispered in his ear. Izuku blushed and hugged Shinso tighter. Really? He asked shyly. Really, Shinso confirmed. Suddenly, their classmates barged backstage, bombarding Izuku with questions. The sudden pressure overwhelmed him, and tears began to form in his eyes. He buried his face into Shinso's chest, wrapping his arms around him tightly. Shinso protectively wrapped his arms around Izuku and shot a glare at the class, who immediately fell silent. Do you all not have any awareness? He can't answer 100 questions at once. He doesn't have to answer, nor does he want to. Just leave us alone, Shinso growled. The class quickly dispersed, leaving Shinso to care for Izuku, which he was more than happy to do. You okay? He asked, looking down at the boy who still had his head buried in his chest. Izuku didn't move or respond. Izuku, baby, look at me, please, Shinso pleaded, needing to ensure Izuku was alright. Slowly, Izuku looked up, and Shinso's heart broke a little at the sight of Izuku's red, puffy eyes, tears still pooling as if they might overflow. Don't worry, it's okay. I'm sorry I didn't make them quiet down sooner, Shinso said with a sad expression. How about we go to my dorm and do whatever you want? How does that sound? He asked softly. Can we just cuddle, please? Izuku asked quietly, a hint of fear in his voice about being rejected. Of course we can, Shinso replied, smiling gently at the smaller boy. Izuku remained still, but Shinso had an idea. Do you want me to carry you? I don't mind, he whispered. Izuku nodded, and Shinso bent down slightly, lifting Izuku so he was clinging to him like a koala. Izuku buried his head into Shinso's neck as they walked back to the dorm. For the rest of the day, they cuddled in Shinso's bed, both content in each other's comfort. Later, Izuku was the first to wake up. Still half asleep, he realized he was lying on Shinso. He felt comfortable and didn't want to move, but Shinso shifted beneath him, turning to lay on his side and holding Izuku close. Izuku moved his head to be face to face with the sleeping boy and began to study his features. Despite Shinso's dark circles under his eyes and messy violet hair, Izuku thought he was very good looking. Slowly, he reached out and gently touched Shinso's face, admiring him. As Izuku rubbed circles on Shinso's cheek and played with his hair, he didn't notice that Shinso had woken up a few moments earlier. If Shinso was honest, he enjoyed Izuku's light touches. Eventually, Izuku found himself just staring, prompting Shinso to speak up. "Take a picture, it lasts longer," he mumbled sleepily. Izuku squeaked and pulled his hand back, hiding his face as he turned onto his back, muttering apologies. Shinso chuckled quietly before sitting up and gently taking Izuku's hands from his face, pulling him to sit in front of him. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," Shinso said sheepishly. "It's okay. I'm sorry I touched you without your consent," Izuku mumbled, looking down. "Hey, it's alright. I didn't mind," Shinso reassured him. "How about we go chill in the common room? I think the class mentioned going out today, so they won't be here for a couple of hours." "How does that sound?" he continued, getting up. "Yeah, sure," Izuku replied quietly. Shinso went to the bathroom to change while Izuku went to the closet to put on a hoodie. Once he put it on, he felt a bit constricted. This hoodie was the only one he owned and had since he was 14, making it quite tight. When Shinso emerged from the bathroom and saw Izuku tugging at his hoodie, he stepped in front of him and offered his own. "Here, you look uncomfortable." "Thanks," Izuku mumbled, taking the hoodie and putting it on after removing the other one. "Come on, let's go." Shinso took Izuku's hand and gently led him to the common room. As expected, the dorms were quiet, the rest of the class was out at the shopping mall, leaving Shinso and Izuku alone. At some point, they ended up watching movies while cuddling on the couch. Shinso lay back with his head turned to the TV, one hand running through Izuku's unruly hair. Izuku lay on top of him, arms around Shinso's waist, resting his head on his chest. A comfortable silence enveloped them, broken only by the movie playing in the background. However, their peaceful moment was interrupted when the class returned, talking loudly among themselves. Izuku stiffened, instinctively putting his walls back up as he turned away from the movie to grab a book from the coffee table. He turned around, still leaning against Shinso but with his back pressed against his chest, and began to read to block out the noise. Shinso returned his hand to Izuku's hair, occasionally rubbing his arm or shoulder in an attempt to ease the tension, but it didn't seem to help. After a while, the class noticed them and settled on the other couches and floor, watching the movie and chatting quietly. Izuku felt movement behind him and sat up slightly, realizing Shinso was leaning back against the armrest. Once comfortable, Shinso pulled Izuku back against his chest, wrapping his arms around Izuku's waist and gently rubbing his stomach. Izuku sighed contentedly, a small blush creeping onto his cheeks as he returned to his reading. After a while, Izuku heard his name being called and looked up to see some classmates looking at him. He kept his expression neutral until he heard his name again and turned to see Shinso smiling softly at him. Izuku's face softened, and he smiled back. Before anything could be said, Mina squealed, causing Izuku's expression to revert to neutral as he raised an eyebrow at her. Shinso, noticing Izuku's reaction, sighed. "She wanted to prove a point," he said. "Prove what?" Izuku asked, confused. Shinso chuckled at Izuku's bewilderment and gently pushed some hair out of his face. Before he could respond, Mina jumped in. "To prove that you only open up to Shinso. You always have this stone-cold face with everyone else, but when you're with him, you show emotion. It's adorable and shows how much you trust him." Mina smiled softly at the two boys, Izuku and Shinso, while the rest of their friends, Bakugo, Uraraka, Lita, and Todoroki, were present in the room. Mina was still excitedly chatting, and Lita and Todoroki sat at the dining table, working on what appeared to be homework. Bakugo and Uraraka were casting sharp glares at both Shinso and Izuku. Ignoring their stares, Izuku took one of Shinso's hands from around his waist, intertwining their fingers and curling up in Shinso's lap with a book he had set aside. He sought comfort and warmth amidst the noise and attention from his classmates. Shinso, noticing Izuku's discomfort, pulled him closer and returned the glares at Bakugo and Uraraka until they backed off. The two remained cuddled on the couch until dinner, and later, they continued to enjoy each other's company in bed, content in their closeness. Around 3 a.m., Shinso woke up, his insomnia kicking in. He glanced at Izuku, who was fast asleep, one leg draped over Shinso's lap. Shinso smiled at the sight before carefully moving Izuku's leg and quietly getting up to head to the bathroom. After washing his hands, he planned to play games on his phone until Izuku woke up. However, when he returned to the room, he found Izuku tossing and turning in bed, silent tears streaming down his face. He was having a nightmare. Shinso rushed to Izuku's side, wanting to wake him up and prevent him from suffering. He could hear Izuku mumbling phrases of distress, which broke Shinso's heart. He shook Izuku gently, then harder, urging him to wake up. When Izuku finally shot up, gasping and looking around frantically, Shinso quickly pulled him into his lap. "It's okay, Izuku, I'm here," he whispered, rubbing Izuku's back soothingly as Izuku clung to him, trembling and sobbing apologies. Shinso reassured him that there was nothing to be sorry for, and after a few minutes, Izuku calmed down to quiet sniffles. "Do you want to talk about it?" Shinso asked softly, shifting so he could lean against the headboard with Izuku nestled in his lap. Izuku took a deep breath and shared that his nightmare was about his parents. He explained that he had been diagnosed as quirkless when he was actually not, leading to years of abuse from his parents. He recounted how he had to steal food to survive and how his best friend had betrayed him, compounding his pain. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Shinso said, gently wiping a tear from Izuku's cheek. Izuku reassured him that it wasn't his fault and continued to share his nightmare, where he saw his parents harming Shinso. The thought of losing him was overwhelming, and he broke down again, clinging tightly to Shinso. As Izuku cried, Shinso whispered comforting words, promising that he would always be there. Eventually, Izuku fell asleep again, exhausted from his emotions. By 5 a.m., Shinso was watching funny cat videos on his phone while absent-mindedly running his fingers through Izuku's hair. As the sun began to shine through the curtains, Izuku stirred and opened his eyes, staring at the plain wall. Shinso noticed and asked softly if he was okay. Izuku, lost in thought, looked up at Shinso, their eyes locking in an intense moment of connection. After a few moments, they both blinked, breaking the trance. "Sorry, I got lost in thought," Izuku mumbled. "It's okay, Izuku," Shinso replied gently. "So, what are we doing today?" Izuku whispered as he sat up, stretching with a yawn. "Anything you want," Shinso replied, gazing at Izuku with a soft expression. Izuku looked back at Shinso, and their eyes met in a gentle stare. After a moment, Shinso whispered, "Can I kiss you?" Izuku gulped, feeling a rush of emotions. Please," he responded, almost pleadingly. Shinso smiled and beckoned Izuku to move closer, gently holding the back of his head and bringing him near until there was just an inch between them. He paused, giving Izuku a moment to back out if he wanted. Realizing Shinso was waiting for him, Izuku smiled slightly, closed his eyes, and closed the distance between them. When their lips finally touched, it felt like fireworks, sending a shiver down Izuku's spine. He held the back of Shinso's head and deepened the kiss. Izuku was the first to pull away, gasping for air, and Shinso was in a similar state. Once they caught their breath, they rested their foreheads together. "That was amazing," Shinso whispered with a smile. Izuku's face flushed as he nodded shyly. What are we? He asked nervously. Well, I really like you and would love it if you agreed to be my boyfriend, Shinso said, equally nervous. Izuku's face lit up, and he squealed slightly before hugging Shinso tightly. I would love to be your boyfriend, I like you a lot too. I'm glad. What should we do today? Shinso asked. Can we do what we did yesterday? Izuku asked shyly, lifting his face from Shinso's neck. Of course we can, baby. Let's go, Shinso replied, lifting Izuku up and sitting him on the edge of the bed. He got up and went to the closet, grabbing one of his hoodies and handing it to Izuku, who happily put it on. Once they were both dressed in comfortable clothes, Shinso took Izuku's hand and led him to the common room, where a few other students were. They sat on an empty couch, cuddling just like they had the day before, both content in each other's arms, unaware that a couple of classmates were watching them with disapproval. The next morning, Izuku was getting ready for school. After showering and changing into his uniform, he headed to Shinso's dorm so they could walk to class together. They had both spent the night in Shinso's dorm, but Izuku had left to prepare for school, agreeing to meet up again when they were ready. As Izuku approached Shinso's dorm, he received a text message. Thinking it was Shinso checking on him, he pulled out his phone with a small smile. However, the message read, "You think you're all that? I'm going to show you that I'm better and you're nothing. You better watch your back, Izuku. I'm going to ruin your relationship with Shinso and make everyone hate you. Just you watch." Izuku's smile faded as he reread the message, trying to make sense of it. Only a few people knew about their relationship, including Izuku's dad and a couple of Shinso's friends. He considered who might have sent the message and made a mental note to talk to his dad about it when they got to class. With a frown, he put his phone away and knocked on Shinso's door. Shinso opened the door quickly, his bag slung over his shoulder. He noticed the frown on Izuku's face and immediately sensed something was wrong. He stepped out, locked the door behind him, and took Izuku's hand, leading him to the elevator. "What's wrong, Shinso asked as they rode down. "I got a weird text on my way back to your room. I'm going to talk to Dad about it when we get to class," Izuku replied, his frown deepening. "What did the text say?" Shinso asked, standing in front of Izuku. Izuku hesitated, then pulled out his phone and showed Shinso the message. Shinso read it carefully, then hummed thoughtfully. "I'm sure this is an empty threat, but if you're worried, you can keep sleeping with me, and I'll go with you when you tell your dads. Is that okay with you?" Izuku nodded, grateful for Shinso's support. "I'll keep this for now in case you get any new messages," Shinso said, tucking the phone into his back pocket. He took Izuku's hand again as the elevator doors opened, and they walked to class in silence, both contemplating the message. Shinso was concerned for Izuku. He knew Izuku was usually closed off and had only recently started to open up. He wanted to be there for him and hoped that whoever sent the message wouldn't succeed in turning people against him. Izuku, on the other hand, was more worried about losing Shinso than about what others thought of him. He felt that if he lost Shinso, it would be like losing a vital part of himself. Once they reached the classroom, Izuku went straight to his dad's desk and crouched down next to him. "Dad," he said, shaking him lightly. When Aizawa's eyes opened, ready to scold whoever woke him, they softened upon seeing Izuku. He sat up and crawled out of his sleeping bag. "What is it, problem child?" I'm sure it's nothing, but this morning I got a weird text from an unknown number when I was on my way to meet Toshi," Izuku said as he sat down in his chair. He trailed off, turning to Shinso and holding out his hand. Shinso dug into his back pocket and handed Izuku his phone, which he then gave to Aizawa after pulling up the message. "I have a small list of people it could be since only a few people know about mine and Toshi's relationship, so I can narrow it down quite easily," Izuku continued as his dad read the message. "I'll look into it," Aizawa said, looking up from the phone. "Can you make a list of people you think sent it? You might not think it's a big deal, but if it's someone from this class, then I will expel them. This is not a heroic act, and they do not deserve to be a hero. He turned to Shinso. You stay by his side, and if you break my son's heart, there will be consequences. For emphasis, he activated his quirk, his eyes glowing red. Shinso nodded quickly. Of course, sir. I would never dream of it, he said sincerely. Aizawa smirked and deactivated his quirk. Good. Now, Izuku, work on that list and cross off people you know you can trust. I want a list of people on my desk by the end of the day. Now go sit, he ordered. Izuku and Shinso bowed and walked to their respective seats. However, when they were seated, Izuku turned in his chair. Do you really think it's serious? My dad's acting as if it's life or death, Izuku whispered to his boyfriend. I don't know, but whether it's serious or not, we need to find out who sent that text. You don't deserve to be threatened, Shinso replied, reaching over to hold Izuku's hand. Yeah, I suppose, Izuku mumbled. For the rest of the day, Izuku observed everyone, writing down names of those he thought were hostile or who gave him nasty looks. But nothing really happened, everyone was nice to him, some nicer than usual, which made him nervous. He did have a few people who didn't seem to like him, though. Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki had never liked Izuku, so he was a possibility, but Izuku didn't think he would go that far since he hadn't really spared him a glance since starting UA. Still, he wrote him down on his list. Denki Kaminari. Denki sometimes looked at him with anger or jealousy, especially when Shinso was with him. If Izuku was too close to Shinso, like sitting right next to him in the common room, he would get a look from Denki. Izuku thought he might have a crush on Shinso and was jealous, so he was also a possibility, but again, Izuku didn't think he would threaten him. Ochiko Uraraka. She often gave Izuku nasty looks, and he had caught her looking ready to confront Shinso, but then she would catch Izuku's eyes and instantly smile sweetly at him. She flirted with him relentlessly and was always touching him, making him uncomfortable. Izuku suspected her the most, she seemed the most likely to send threats. By the end of the day, he had ruled everyone out except for those three. He wrote their names down on a clean sheet of paper and, as he passed his father in the halls on his way to Shinso's dorm, he slid the paper into his hand before continuing on his way. Izuku knocked on Shinso's door and waited for him to answer. He had gone to his dorm to grab a change of clothes before heading to Shinso's, not wanting to be alone. Shinso opened the door almost instantly and stepped aside, letting Izuku in. You okay, Shinso asked as he closed and locked his door, then flopped onto his bed next to where Izuku had sat. Yeah, I guess, Izuku mumbled. Shinso propped himself up on his elbows to look at his boyfriend and was about to ask what was wrong when Izuku spoke first. Can I change in your bathroom, please? He asked quietly. Oh, yeah, of course, Shinso replied, watching as Izuku hurried into the bathroom. A few minutes later, Izuku came out, dumping his clothes in the corner where his bag was before walking back to Shinso's bed. However, before he could sit properly, Shinso pulled him to straddle his lap and cupped his face, looking into his eyes as if searching for something. What are you doing? Izuku mumbled, not looking away from Shinso's gaze. Shinso didn't answer right away, a few seconds passed before his expression shifted into one of recognition. Why are you scared, baby? Shinso murmured, leaning back slightly to look at Izuku properly. Izuku flinched slightly and tried to pull his face away from Shinso's grasp, but he failed. What do you mean? I can see it in your eyes, You're scared of something. Is it to do with that text? Izuku stayed quiet, though his eyes revealed his feelings. Izuku, I'm sure it was an empty threat. Our class is like one big family, and they all love you. I'm positive that if the person who sent the message does anything to get you in trouble or tries to turn them against you, the class would believe you. Once he was certain he was clean, Izuku stepped out of the shower and wrapped a towel around his waist. Avoiding the mirror, he walked back into his room, pulled on a long-sleeved shirt to cover his scars, and slipped into his boxers and gym shorts. He grabbed his phone and school bag before leaving his room. Making his way to the kitchen, Izuku took a bottle of cold water from the fridge and a protein bar, planning to eat it on the way to school. He walked to school and headed to the gym, feeling a small sigh of relief when he saw it was empty. He set his things down on a bench, connected his phone to the speakers, and started stretching. Once he was properly warmed up, he began practicing basic gymnastics, like cartwheels and handstands, enjoying the challenge of holding a handstand as long as possible. He even attempted push-ups in that position before moving on to more difficult stunts, like backflips and handsprings. Izuku was so focused on landing his flips with precision that he didn't hear the gym door open until someone shouted his name, startling him. "Oi, Deku." He barely managed to land the flip he was attempting with a stumble and turned to see the Baku squad standing by the door, their faces full of shock. "Hey," a familiar voice called again. It was Katsuki Bakugo, someone who had bullied Izuku for years, despite their childhood friendship. Bakugo had always felt the need to be better than everyone else, and when he perceived a challenge, especially from Izuku, he would lash out. "Where the hell did you learn how to do all that? Do you think you're better than me, HAH?" Bakugo shouted, his frustration evident. Izuku sighed, wiping the sweat from his face with a small towel. "I taught myself years ago, and no, I don't think I'm better than you. I don't know why you keep asking me that when I've never even mentioned it. You're honestly just wasting your breath." Bakugo raged, "You talking back to me, Deku?" He continued, "I'm going to be the #1 hero, and you nerd, are going to be wishing you were me because you're just a lonely, useless Deku who nobody likes." Izuku noted that Bakugo had called him useless twice in a row. At that moment, the Baku squad seemed to snap out of their shock, and Kirishima stepped forward to defend Izuku. "Hey, Baku bro, that's so not manly. Midoriya isn't useless." Kirishima stood next to Izuku, who winced slightly at the use of his old last name. "It's okay, Kirishima," Izuku said, not wanting Bakugo to lash out at him for trying to help. "I get it. You'll be the #1 hero, and no one likes me because I'm a loner, a Deku. I get it. You don't have to keep telling me." With that, Izuku turned on his heels, grabbed his phone, water bottle, and school bag, and walked out. He could faintly hear Kirishima calling his name, but he ignored it and continued toward the locker room to change into his uniform. "I did not get enough sleep to deal with this today," he thought with a tired sigh. Time skipped to when everyone is in class. Everyone was talking amongst themselves, all except Izuku, who was struggling with the noise. After a few minutes, it became overwhelming, and he quickly dug through his bag for his headphones. Once he put them on and leaned his head on his arms, the music helped him cope with the chaos around him. Soon, the class door opened, revealing their homeroom teacher, Aizawa. Everyone quickly scurried to their seats while Aizawa walked to his desk. He noticed Izuku with his head down and headphones on, already aware of his sensory issues, and decided to leave him be. "Alright, everyone, get your gym clothes and head to the field. We'll be working on hand-to-hand combat today, so make sure you're changed and stretched by the time I get there. Now go," Aizawa stated in his usual tired tone, watching as his students rushed out of the classroom. Everyone except Izuku left, and Aizawa made his way over to him. He crouched down and gently pulled out Izuku's headphones, placing them back in his bag. "Izuku," he asked softly, receiving a quiet hum in response. "Let me guess, you were up all night." "I was studying for that test coming up, then I was in the gym this morning and had a slight argument with Kaken, if you can even call it that." "More like him yelling at me again," Izuku mumbled, moving to hug his dad. "Okay, come on. You can rest with Mike for a bit, and I'll have a word with you later about Bakugo and try to get it sorted. I'm sure Mike would love some cuddles with you, so rest for as long as you need," Aizawa said with a chuckle at the end. Izuku clung to him like a koala as Aizawa made his way to the teacher's lounge. Aizawa carried Izuku all the way to the teacher's lounge, where he knew his husband would be. As he walked in, he found Hizashi Yamada, Aizawa's husband, sitting at his desk doing paperwork. Yamada didn't have any lessons to teach that day, so he was in casual clothes. He still had to come into school, though, as he had a lot of work to prepare for the lessons he would teach the next day. Hearing the door open, Yamada looked up and saw his husband holding their adopted son in his arms. Yamada quickly got up from his desk and walked over to check on his son. "Hey babe, is he okay?" Yamada asked, tilting his head with a hint of concern in his voice. Aizawa nodded at his partner. "Yeah, he's just tired. He told me he was up all night studying for that upcoming test. Also, Bakugo was starting trouble again this morning, so I want him to rest before I have a conversation about it later. I unfortunately have a class to teach," Aizawa explained with a tired sigh. "Oh, of course I can take him. Come on, little listener," Yamada said softly as he gently took Izuku from Aizawa. Izuku instantly latched onto his papa, mumbling incoherently before falling back asleep. Yamada smiled and placed a soft, loving kiss on Aizawa's lips before sitting back at his desk with his son in his lap, continuing his work. The corners of Aizawa's lips tugged up slightly into a barely noticeable smile before he left to teach his students. Meanwhile, Kirishima and the rest of Class 2A boys were in the locker room changing for hero training when Kirishima realized that he couldn't see that familiar head of green hair. Midoriya wasn't there. No one else seemed to notice that one of their classmates was missing, but it didn't surprise him much since Midoriya often kept to himself. However, he always showed up for training, so Kirishima wondered why he wasn't there today. Was it because of what Bakugo said this morning? Mr. Aizawa was 10 minutes late, but at least he showed up. When he did, he paired everyone up, and they began training in hand-to-hand combat. Kirishima found hand-to-hand combat fun, especially since his quirk allowed him to harden his skin. He knew he needed to learn close combat skills for real villain encounters. Once the lesson was over and they were dismissed, Kirishima ran to catch up with Mr. Aizawa to ask about Midoriya. "Sensei," he called out. Aizawa turned to face him. "What is it?" he asked in his usual tired tone. "I was just wondering if you know where Midoriya is. He wasn't in training, and he seemed tired and stressed this morning. Bakugo was going off on him again when we found him in the gym, and since then he seemed more closed off than usual," Kirishima rambled nervously, fiddling with his hands. Aizawa studied him for a moment before sighing. "Problem child is fine. He was just overwhelmed by the noise, so I gave him some time to calm down. I'm glad you noticed, though, very observant." Kirishima let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Thank you for letting me know he was okay. If you don't mind me asking, what do you mean by overwhelmed by all the noise?" he asked, confused. Aizawa sighed again. He was having a slight sensory overload with all the chatter in the classroom, which is why he had headphones in, he explained. "Oh, I didn't know that. Well, I'll keep that in mind if I see him getting stressed," Kirishima said with a slightly awkward smile. Aizawa nodded. "Okay, well thank you again, sensei. See you later." Kirishima bowed before running off to change for his next lesson, a small smile on his face knowing that Midoriya was okay. At lunchtime, everyone was in the cafeteria eating and having fun with their friends, chatting away like normal teens. However, Izuku was sitting on the roof of the UA building with his legs hanging off the edge, lost in thought. He reflected on everything that had happened in his life, both the good and the bad. Unfortunately, there were far more bad experiences than good, more than he would admit if someone asked him. Despite everything, Izuku was grateful for his dad's, Shota Aizawa, also known as the underground pro-hero Eraserhead, and Hizashi Yamada Aizawa, known as the voice hero Present Mic, for saving his life and helping him piece it back together, even if it was a slow process. When Izuku was born, his biological parents were kind and considerate, but when they discovered he was quirkless, they began to abuse and neglect him. In reality, Izuku wasn't quirkless, a doctor had given him a false negative. He actually had 2 quirks, but he only used one of them in battle. His primary quirk, Green Flame, allowed him to create green fire with the ability to control its temperature. However, if he used it for too long, he risked burning himself. The other quirk, telekinesis, was inherited from his mother, but it was much stronger than hers. He could move anything with his mind, even people's blood cells. Although he practiced with both quirks, he chose not to use telekinesis in battle due to the painful memories associated with it. When Izuku was 15, he had a traumatic experience with his biological parents, which left him deeply scarred. He managed to escape, using the last of his energy to run as far as he could until he collapsed. Aizawa and Hizashi were out for a walk when they stumbled upon their student lying on the ground, injured and in distress. Shocked by the sight, they quickly took him to the hospital, where he received treatment and was later adopted by the hero couple. Izuku, however, was hesitant to share the details of his past, revealing that he had endured abuse from his parents before managing to escape. Fearful of what they might do if they found him again, he sought reassurance, which Aizawa and Hizashi were more than willing to provide. Aizawa took it upon himself to help Izuku prepare for the UA entrance exam, ensuring he was his teacher so he could support him in becoming a hero. Due to his traumatic past, Izuku was often closed off, struggling to connect with others and lacking friends. Many viewed him as strange for his silence and lack of emotional expression. He bore scars from various sources, including bullying, and faced significant mental health challenges. Katsuki was one of the few who still picked on Izuku, often shouting at him and using his quirk, but it was less intense than during middle school, and Izuku had learned to defend himself when necessary. To cope with his stress, Izuku occasionally turned to smoking and drinking, though he didn't indulge often. One evening, while deep in thought on the rooftop, he lit a cigarette, reflecting on his life. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice Kirishima approaching until he sat down beside him. Kirishima broke the silence, mentioning that he had seen Izuku up there and thought he might enjoy some company. He noted that he hadn't seen Izuku in the cafeteria before and asked if he always sat on the roof. Izuku replied that he preferred it up there and questioned whether Kirishima's friends would find it odd for him to hang out with someone like Izuku. Kirishima reassured him that it was fine and admitted that sometimes his friends could be a bit overwhelming. He expressed a longing to be friends with Izuku, sensing his loneliness. Surprised, Izuku questioned why Kirishima would want to be friends with him, sharing his fears of being abandoned once people learned about his troubled past. Kirishima listened patiently, understanding Izuku's trust issues and promising that he wouldn't leave him. He emphasized that everyone deserves friends and happiness. As Kirishima spoke, Izuku felt a wave of emotion, nearly brought to tears by the kindness being offered to him. Despite his doubts, Izuku hesitantly accepted Kirishima's hand and stood up, only to be enveloped in a warm embrace. Initially tense, he gradually relaxed into the comfort of the hug, feeling a sense of safety he had never experienced before. Kirishima reassured him that he was willing to help him through his struggles whenever he was ready to share. As Izuku finally allowed himself to lean into the embrace, tears streamed down his face. Kirishima held him tightly, whispering comforting words and gently rubbing his back. In that moment, Izuku felt a warmth and connection he had longed for, realizing that perhaps he could have a friend who truly cared. There was something different about Kirishima. Izuku could hear the sincerity in his voice, and he meant every word he said. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. He really hoped so. The next day, Izuku was still in bed, staring at the ceiling. His alarm had gone off about 20 minutes ago, but he didn't move. He felt conflicted as he mentally replayed the events of yesterday's lunchtime over and over again. He was trying to figure out if the whole thing was a cruel joke. Kirishima had sounded so sincere, and if it was a prank, Izuku didn't think he could handle it. He was scared because he had cried in front of someone. He had only cried a couple of times before, and that was in front of his new dads when discussing his past. He was scared because he had cried in Kirishima's embrace and had loved it. Even after one hug, Izuku wanted another from the redhead, wanting to feel his strong arms wrap around him in a secure embrace and make him feel safe again. But he was also scared of what would happen when he got to school. Would it be a prank? Would Kirishima actually be there for him? What did having friends even look or feel like? Maybe Izuku would just skip school to have another day to think about everything. Yeah, that sounded like a good idea. A few more minutes passed, and Izuku's door opened. Heavy footsteps approached his bed, and the side of his bed dipped with someone's weight as they sat down. It was his dad, Aizawa. "What's wrong, kid? You're normally up and ready before me and Mike are," Aizawa said. Izuku turned his head to look at his dad and sighed. "I'm fine, just confused and stuck, I guess," he mumbled. "About what?" Aizawa asked. Izuku sighed again. "So yesterday, I was sitting on the roof like normal, but then someone came up and sat with me. They said they wanted a small break from their friend group because they were loud and that they saw me go up to the roof a lot. They said they wanted to be my friend, my friend. Can you believe it? I told them no because they were probably going to use me like everyone else. But then they went on about how they wouldn't and that they would prove they were good. They even said I deserved to have friends and not be lonely. Then he promised that he wouldn't leave. I cried in his arms, and now I'm terrified of going to school." Izuku finished his rant with a big intake of breath followed by a huff. It was silent for a moment as Aizawa processed the information. "Was it Kirishima?" Aizawa asked, looking at his son. "Yeah," Izuku replied, not wanting to know how his dad knew who it was. His dad's smarts sometimes scared him. "And you're overthinking it, thinking it's a prank or something," Aizawa said. "How did he know?" "Not just that. What if Kirishima breaks his promise and leaves? What if I do or say something stupid and hurt his feelings? I mean, I don't even know what having friends looks or feels like. How am I going to act?" Izuku stressed. "You know," Aizawa started, "Kirishima is a good person. He is kind and considerate of others. I know you can trust him. I mean, I have taught the same class for nearly 3 years, so I think I know a bit about my students' personalities. Just be yourself, kid. You don't have to worry. I know it's easier said than done, but try to open up to him. It will do you some good, I promise." Izuku sighed but nodded anyway, sitting up and hugging his dad tightly. "Okay, come on, you're going to be late," Aizawa reminded softly, letting go of Izuku. "Oh no, I forgot about that," Izuku exclaimed, jumping out of bed and starting to get ready. "Problem child," Aizawa mumbled to himself, chuckling softly as he left Izuku to get ready. As Izuku walked into class with his dad behind him, he took his seat and waited for Aizawa to explain their lesson. "Do whatever you want, just don't disturb me," Aizawa said. Izuku thought to himself that he wouldn't be listening to the lesson because there was no real lesson today. His thoughts were interrupted by a chair being placed in front of his desk, and Kirishima sat down. "Hey, Midoriya. How are you doing?" Kirishima asked, leaning his elbows on the desk. I'm doing fine. What about you?" Izuku replied, unsure. "That's good. I'm fantastic, thanks for asking." Kirishima beamed. As Kirishima started talking about a random video game he and his friends played, Izuku took the time to analyze his features, his pink lips, smooth skin, crimson eyes, and soft facial features. Kirishima's voice was ecstatic when he talked about something he loved, like his video games or his friends. "Hey, Mido, you okay?" Kirishima asked with concern. Izuku realized he must have been staring too long. "Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry, I just spaced out," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Sorry, I must have been boring you. I don't mean to talk so much. We can talk about something else if you want," Kirishima started, sheepishly rubbing his neck, but Izuku cut him off. No, please continue. Honestly, it's fine. I like listening to you. So what about that game?" Izuku said with a small smile. Kirishima beamed before continuing. Izuku leaned in slightly, resting his elbows on the table with the side of his face in his palm, listening to Kirishima talk with a small smile on his face. He liked this friendship thing so far. It was the weekend, and Izuku was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He found himself doing that a lot recently, thinking about random things. He glanced over at his bedside table where his phone was and leaned over to grab it. Turning it on, he saw a message from Kirishima. Kirishima, hey Izuku, wanna hang out today? I'm bored and I miss you. Izuku sat up on his bed and crossed his legs before replying. Izuku, hello Kiri, sure, I don't mind hanging out. You saw me like 2 days ago, and we see each other tomorrow for school as well. Kirishima, well, you're my friend, and I miss your company. Izuku, well, I miss you too. Where do you want to meet? At the park, Izuku felt grateful for his friendship with Kirishima. While some of his friends teased him for talking too much, Kirishima had never complained. Honestly, your friends are wrong, Izuku said. They say you're annoying, but I bet they just talk for hours while you listen. Am I right? Kirishima nodded, you're right, but I think they don't mean anything by it. The topics I discuss just don't interest them. Izuku frowned, that's not fair. Do you want to spend the night at my house? We can talk more about your friends and how they treat you. Sure, but you don't have to worry about them. They're fine, Kirishima replied. I'll decide that for myself when I see you. I'll send you my address. See you soon, Kirishima. See you soon, and I can't believe you used an emoji. I'm so proud, Izuku said with a smile. As Izuku turned off his phone, he felt a small smile on his face. He headed downstairs to find his dads cuddling on the couch. Hey, Papa, Dad, he greeted them. What's up, kid? His dad asked. I invited Kirishima to stay the night. We're going to talk about his friends and walk to school together, Izuku said. Papa smiled widely, that's fine, Izuku. If you need anything, just let us know. Izuku watched as his dad cuddled closer to Papa, who started playing with his hair. He thought about how cute they were together and wished for a similar connection. Remembering the hug Kirishima had given him, he felt a longing for another one but hesitated to ask. Dad, Papa, he called again. Yes, they replied in unison. Is it weird to ask someone you haven't known for long for a hug? He asked, fiddling with his hands. I'm sure Kirishima would love to give you one if you ask, his dad said, sounding a bit smug. Really? Izuku asked, looking up. Really, his dad confirmed with a smile. Now go set up your room. Izuku headed to his room, lying on his bed and waiting for Kirishima. He contemplated whether to ask for a hug, feeling nervous but excited. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. He jumped up and rushed downstairs, where he saw Papa inviting Kirishima in. As Izuku approached, he and Kirishima exchanged glances. Hey, Izuku said, breaking the silence. Hey, Izuku. How are you? Kirishima replied. I'm good. Want to come to my room and talk? Izuku suggested, noticing Papa watching them from the corridor. He glared playfully at him, and Papa smiled nervously before retreating. Come on, Izuku said, taking Kirishima's hand and leading him upstairs. He closed the door behind them and sat on his bed, patting the space next to him. So, can you tell me how your friends treat you? Izuku asked after a moment of silence. Kirishima hesitated, then sighed. Well, they often say I'm annoying, and sometimes it feels like I'm not really there. When I share something, they ignore it or brag about themselves. The only one who's nice to me is Denki. We help each other out. Izuku could hear the sadness in Kirishima's voice. Well, they're not being good friends, he said. When you talk about things you like, that's not annoying. If you ever get annoying, I promise I'll tell you. And remember, no one is perfect. As long as you're trying your best, that's what matters. We can study together if you want. It's okay to need help. Kirishima started to tear up as Izuku continued, "It's good you have Denki. But you need to distance yourself from the rest of the group. They're not good for you. If they try to manipulate you, promise me you'll come to me or Denki, okay? You were there for me, so let me be here for you." By the end of his speech, Kirishima was crying, and Izuku shuffled closer, pulling him into a comforting hug. He instantly hugged back and buried his face into my chest. I rubbed his back and whispered reassuring words into his ear. After about 10 minutes, he stopped crying but didn't show any signs of moving. I didn't mind at all, I really liked the hug. I thought sarcastically, well, at least I don't have to ask for a hug now. After another few minutes, I decided to break the silence. "Do you want to watch a movie?" I asked softly in his ear. Kiri just nodded and hesitantly let go. "You can lay down on my bed if you want, I'm just going to set up Netflix," I informed him as I turned on the TV. Kiri did as instructed, and I got some snacks from downstairs before coming back up and getting on the bed next to him to find a movie. "What do you want to watch?" I asked, not looking away from the TV. "Do you like any anime shows?" he asked, almost sounding nervous. "Oh, I love anime shows. Do you like Jujutsu Kaisen or Bungo Stray Dogs?" I asked, looking over at him. "Oh, I love Jujutsu Kaisen, but I don't know what Bungo Stray Dogs is," he answered with a head tilt. "Oh, I think you will love Bungo Stray Dogs. Can I put it on?" I asked, showing a bit of excitement. He smiled and chuckled, nodding his head. I squealed quietly and turned back to the TV to find the show and put it on. Time passed, and they ended up binge-watching the first season. They probably would have watched more if Mike hadn't called them down to dinner. At the dinner table, there was no chatter, just the sound of cutlery hitting plates. It wasn't an awkward silence, but Izuku still didn't like it and decided to break it. "So, what's the plan for training tomorrow?" he asked, curious. Aizawa looked up at his son and grinned. "You will have to find out, you know I don't go easy," Aizawa said, looking Izuku dead in the eyes. Izuku didn't back down from the staring contest, a common occurrence between them. Mike and Kirishima watched with amusement as they stared at each other. After a few minutes, Aizawa blinked and lost eye contact with his son. It was as if the world paused for a second, but it resumed when Izuku stood up to announce his victory. "I did it. I finally won." Izuku giggled, showing some of his buried childish personality. Aizawa smiled and rolled his eyes playfully at his son, while Mike shook his head with a smile. Kirishima, however, looked at Izuku with caring eyes, a blush spreading across his cheeks. Once Izuku's giggles died down and he sat back in his seat with a giddy smile, everyone continued to eat, this time with steady conversation. After dinner, Mike and Aizawa went on patrol, leaving Izuku and Kirishima at home alone. "Come on, Kiri, let's head up to my room and watch some more Bungo Stray Dogs before bed. We unfortunately have school tomorrow and have to deal with your friends and my. Well, you get the idea." "Come on," Izuku said, grabbing Kirishima's hand and dragging him upstairs, ignoring the chuckles from the others at his stumble of words. Once upstairs, Izuku put the TV back on and got on his bed, motioning for Kirishima to do the same, which he did. They began to watch their show again. Throughout the episode, Izuku and Kirishima subconsciously moved closer until they were cuddled together. Did they realize it? Yes. Did they care? No. Did they move apart or show any signs of discomfort? Also no. They continued to cuddle, lost in each other's warmth, soon falling asleep in each other's arms. It was about 6 a.m. when Izuku woke up. Normally, he would only get about an hour or two of sleep a night due to insomnia, so having at least 5 hours of sleep was a good change. He woke up feeling warm and comfortable, resting on a soft but firm surface. After a couple of minutes of trying to go back to sleep, he felt movement beneath him. Peeking his eyes open, he realized he was not on pillows but instead on top of Kirishima, who was still asleep. Izuku's face flushed red as he stared at the boy beneath him. He glanced at the alarm clock. 6. I have about an hour and a half until we need to get up for school, may as well make the most of this, he thought. With that, Izuku cuddled closer to Kirishima and fell back asleep. Izuku's alarm went off for them to get ready for school. Kirishima was the first to wake up this time, leaning over Izuku to turn off the alarm. Izuku had shifted in his sleep and was now lying next to the redhead instead of on him. Kirishima leaned back down for a minute, still half asleep, when he noticed movement beside him. He turned to look at Izuku, who had shifted to lay on his side facing him. Kirishima turned to face Izuku so he could get a better look at the greenette. Izuku looked so peaceful when he was asleep, his face soft and free from its usual emotionlessness. His plump lips were slightly parted as he breathed. Kirishima thought he looked stunning. Some of Izuku's hair fell in front of his face, so Kirishima instinctively reached out, carefully pushing it back and tucking it behind his ear. He placed his hand on Izuku's cheek, rubbing his thumb over it. Slowly, Izuku opened his eyes and looked at Kirishima. Their eyes met, and Kirishima froze for a moment before trying to pull his hand away, but Izuku placed his hand over Kirishima's, keeping it there. "Morning, Kiri," Izuku mumbled tiredly. "Morning, Kirishima whispered. "My papa will come in soon to wake us up," Izuku said. "We should get up then," Kirishima replied, staring at him. Izuku groaned and snuggled into Kirishima's chest. "I don't wanna," he whined. "Come on, we have school soon," Kirishima said, burying his face in Izuku's hair. "5 more minutes," Izuku pleaded. Kirishima chuckled but didn't protest, loving Izuku's childish side. 5 minutes later, Kirishima gently urged, "Come on, Izuku, we're going to be late." "But I don't want to deal with the annoying class," Izuku mumbled into Kirishima's chest. "What's so bad about the class?" Kirishima asked, stroking Izuku's hair. "Well, your friends can be difficult, other than Denki. Uraraka keeps clinging to me and trying to act cute, which she isn't, by the way. Plus, I don't even like girls, they kind of creep me out. And Kaken can be a pain too. Please don't make me go, I hate almost everyone there," Izuku grumbled, finishing with a whine. "I'm sorry, but we have to. You know Mr. Aizawa will make us," Kirishima said, hugging Izuku a little tighter. There was a moment of silence before Mike burst into the room. "Time to wake up, listeners." "Papa, I don't want to go," Izuku whined, rolling onto his back and freeing Kirishima, who sat up. "Why not? Another one of those days?" Mike asked, sitting on the bed and looking at Izuku. "It's just the people at school. My class doesn't even act like heroes. They might have potential, but they aren't good human beings," Izuku huffed, crossing his arms. "What do they do?" Mike asked, concerned. "Oh, Kaken always belittles me, Uraraka always throws herself at me, and Kirishima's friends can be difficult, other than Denki. I need to befriend him so we can get him away from those guys," Izuku said, getting slightly frustrated. "Okay," Mike chuckled nervously. "Let's calm down, okay?" "Hey, Izuku," Kirishima said from the door. "What?" Izuku snapped, instantly regretting it as he looked over to see Kirishima frowning. "Today we will get Denki and leave the Baku squad, okay? And if Uraraka keeps bothering you, we'll deal with it, but you have to calm down, alright?" Kirishima walked over to the bed. "Okay," Izuku mumbled, not looking at him or Mike. "Alright, I'll leave you two to get ready," Mike said, leaving the room. Izuku sighed and quietly got out of bed, grabbed his uniform, and went into the bathroom to change. Kirishima sat on Izuku's bed, waiting for him. After about 5 minutes, Izuku came out, grabbed his bag, and headed for the door. "Izuku," Kirishima called from the bed. Izuku halted and slowly turned, keeping his head down. "Come here, please," Kirishima said softly. Izuku walked over and stood between Kirishima's legs, refusing to lift his head. "Aizu," Kirishima said gently. Izuku sniffed. I am sorry. Hey, why are you sorry? Kirishima asked softly, moving Izuku closer. I didn't mean to snap at you. I'm sorry, Izuku said, trying to hold back tears, not wanting to feel vulnerable again. He was an emotional person, even when his face was neutral, his mind was often filled with feelings. If someone he cared about was upset with him, he would cry. If he got angry and lashed out, he would cry. He didn't know why, he was just very sensitive. Oh, Izuku, it's okay, Kirishima said, pulling him onto his lap and hugging him. I understand you were just mad about school, so you don't have to apologize. I'm still as sorry, though. You must have felt horrible. You already get treated poorly by your friends, I don't want to add to it, Izuku stressed, with a few sobs interrupting him. Baby, it's okay, I promise. Don't stress about that now. Let's just focus on getting to school and breaking off the friendship. Then, after school, if your dad's okay with it, we can come back here and watch some more anime. How does that sound? Kirishima asked, trying to cheer him up. Oh okay, Izuku mumbled, having calmed down. Come on, we're going to be late if we don't leave soon, Kirishima said, rubbing Izuku's back. Izuku got off Kirishima's lap, grabbed his bag again, and they both walked to the front door to put on their shoes. Hey, have your dads left already? Kirishima asked as Izuku grabbed his keys and walked out the front door with him. Yeah, they leave before me because they're teachers and have to set up for classes before the students arrive. It's only about a 20-minute walk, so I don't mind walking it every day. It's good for my stamina, Izuku murmured as he locked the door and grabbed Kirishima's hand, slightly dragging him along. Kirishima didn't mind and just squeezed Izuku's hand, looking down at him with a smile. Izuku returned a small smile, and they continued to school in comfortable silence. As they entered the school together, still holding hands, they engaged in light conversation, either not noticing or ignoring the stares from their classmates. They knew they weren't early, but they weren't late either. When they reached the door of Class 3A, they walked in to find almost the entire class already there. Hey, Kiri, Midoriya, Denki greeted as they entered, catching the attention of the Baku squad. Hey, Denki, Kirishima replied with a small wave, watching as Izuku nodded in Denki's direction. Denki started to speak, asking what everyone did over the weekend, but was quickly interrupted by Mina, who expressed her annoyance. Can you be quiet for just 1 minute, Denki? You never stop talking, she said, raising her voice slightly. Denki mumbled an apology, looking down. A small chuckle came from Izuku, who was sitting next to Kirishima. Everyone turned to him, curious about what was amusing him. Bakugo, ever the instigator, demanded to know what was funny. Izuku looked up at him with a slight smile, letting out a sigh. Wow, he said, shaking his head. Mina, confused, asked why he was saying, wow. Izuku replied, you really are a bunch of self-centered people, aren't you? The room fell silent as others began to listen. Mina stood up, ready to retort, but Izuku stepped forward, grabbing Denki's arm and pulling him behind himself. Oh, you're excused, all right. What gives you the right to speak to someone like that? Izuku challenged. Mina opened her mouth to respond, but Izuku raised a hand to stop her. You say you're a hero in training, but with the way you treat people, you act more like a villain. He paused, feeling Kirishima tighten his grip on his hand. Taking a deep breath, he continued, not just you, Katsuki. You've acted like a villain since we were kids. You all think you're superior when you're not. You need to get your act together because, frankly, I've had enough. I could go to Principal Nizu and have you all expelled, and yes, I can do that. He shot them a serious glare, his expression softening slightly as he added, Kiri and Denki aren't your playthings anymore. If you even think about trying to hurt them in any way, I will stand up for them. The intensity of his gaze made them quiet and compliant. Izuku then pulled Denki and Kirishima to a corner of the room. After a moment, the class returned to their conversations. Kirishima sat sideways in a chair, while Denki perched on the desk. Izuku stood in front of Kirishima, arms crossed and head down, letting out a frustrated huff. Kirishima said softly, resting his hands on Izuku's hips. Izuku hummed in response without lifting his head. You know I'm not mad at you for snapping earlier, right? It was pretty intense, Kirishima added with a chuckle, pulling Izuku closer for a hug. Izuku buried his face in Kirishima's neck, mumbling just loud enough for him to hear, I really want to confront them. Kirishima chuckled, reminding him that he couldn't resort to violence. But are you okay? He asked, concerned. Yeah, I'm fine. How's Denki? Izuku replied, still not lifting his head. Kirishima glanced at Denki, who was smiling at them. You doing okay, Denki? He asked. Yeah, I'm fine. Hey, Midoriya, Denki said, looking at Izuku. Thank you for standing up for me and Kiri. It really means a lot. Izuku smiled slightly and nodded. It's fine. You can call me Izuku if you want. They had it coming, they can't just treat people like they're nothing. Someone had to put them in their place. Denki laughed, recalling the expressions on their faces. Kirishima watched Izuku with admiration, appreciating both his serious demeanor and his playful side when they were alone. He realized just how much he cared for Izuku, feeling a warmth in his chest as he thought about their close bond. Kirishima started, but doubts crept in. What if Izuku didn't feel the same way? Izuku's voice broke through his thoughts, calling his name again. Ijiro, he said, tapping Kirishima's cheek lightly to get his attention. Huh? Kirishima replied, a bit confused. Izuku had pulled back from their embrace but remained close, looking at him with concern. Are you okay? You seem to space out, he said, holding Kirishima's face gently. Kirishima blushed and avoided eye contact, mumbling that he was fine. Okay, well, class is about to start, Izuku said, sitting next to him. Kirishima nodded, trying to focus on the lesson while feeling a mix of emotions about the day ahead. As lunchtime arrived, the trio sat together, chatting about various topics when the Baku squad approached with feigned sad expressions. Izuku recognized the insincerity in their demeanor and decided to observe, ready to step in if necessary. Hey, Mina said quietly. Kiri and Denki looked at her, not saying anything. We wanted to say sorry and wanted to know if you could forgive us and come sit with us again, she added, looking down and fiddling with her fingers, appearing nervous. Kiri and Denki responded simultaneously, no sure. I turned my head sharply to Denki, giving him a look that questioned his judgment. What? He asked, confused. I sighed, Denki, they were not nice to you, and they're pretending. Trust me, they're just going to be mean and use you again. Please don't go with them. I looked him straight in the eyes, hoping he would understand. Oh, okay, he replied, glancing back at the Baku squad, who looked furious. What do you mean we're the bad ones? You're the one who took our friend away, and it's not our fault, they're just not very smart. You know what? Forget it, we don't want to be your friends anyway, Mina exclaimed, throwing her hands up in frustration. I shot them a hard glare, and once they noticed, they quickly scurried away. Bye-bye, but... I called after them. I was fuming, how dare she say that about my friends? I'm going to get them, I muttered. Whoa, calm down, Kiri said, reaching over the table to hold my hands. It's okay, just let them be. It's not worth your time or energy. I closed my eyes and laid my head on our joined hands with a sigh. But I want to confront them, Kiri. Why won't you let me? I whined. He chuckled, because. Because why? I pouted, lifting my head to look at him. Because I said so, he replied with a smile. I pulled my hands away and crossed them over my chest, looking away. Meanie, I pouted. Kiri and Denki laughed. Hey, What does penpadicos mean? Kaminari asked after calming down. It means bad people in Spanish, I told him with a small smile. When did you learn Spanish? Kiri asked. Oh, I thought for a moment. When I was about 10 or 11, I responded. Are you fluent in it? Kami asked, and I nodded. Can you say a sentence in Spanish, please? He asked excitedly. I sighed, fine. I giro es hermoso, amable y fuerte y lo quiero todo para mí. Kiri tilted his head. You said something about me, right? What did you say? I giggled nervously, nothing bad, I promise. You're not going to tell me? Nope. Ah, come on, please. No. You're no fun, Kiri complained. I just giggled and continued eating my lunch. Time skip, the end of the day. It was the end of the day, and Kirishima and Izuku had just said goodbye to Denki and began their journey home. They were having a nice conversation when Izuku got an idea. Kiri, he whined. Kirishima looked over. What's up, Can you carry me on your back, please? Izuku asked, dragging out the please. Kirishima chuckled, sure, Izuku squealed happily and jumped onto Kirishima's back, wrapping his arms around his neck and his legs around his waist. Kirishima held Izuku's thighs for support. You good? Kiri asked. Yep. Okay, let's go, and off they went home. Once they arrived at Izuku's house, Izuku jumped off Kirishima's back and unlocked the door. Inside, they were greeted by an energetic Mike and a tired Aizawa. Hello, listeners. How was school? Mike asked as Izuku and Kirishima took off their shoes and bags, flopping onto one of the couches. Hiya, Dad. It was okay, other than the Baku squad being a problem, Izuku huffed, leaning on Kirishima, who nodded in agreement. Oh. What did they do? Mike asked, concern in his voice as he sat next to Aizawa. Well, when we went into school, we talked to the Baku squad to inform them that Kiri and Denki weren't their friends anymore because they were horrible to them. We ended up getting into a verbal fight, but I warded them off with my dad glare, Izuku explained, annoyance creeping into his voice as he sank deeper into Kirishima's side. I'll keep an eye out for them, and if I catch them doing anything unheroic, I will just expel them, Aizawa suggested. Izuku nodded. Well, why don't you two go upstairs and change? I will call you for dinner in an hour or two, Mike suggested with a warm smile. Kirishima nodded and was about to get up, but Izuku whined and clung to Kirishima's arm. Come on, we can watch some more anime if you want, but we have to change, Kirishima whispered.